Hello everybody and welcome to our virtual 67 Pall Mall. Finally for today we'll be speaking with Jean-Baptiste Bordeaux-Montrieux of domain Tenard. His family owns the second largest parcel of Le Montrachet and he'll be explaining his family's history and their wines. But now we're very pleased to be joined by Gearoid Devaney MS, one of the owners of Flint, and Flint Wines is really turning out to be one of the country's best importers of Burgundy, and he'll be talking us through his top 6 Premier Cru vineyards of the Côte de Nuits. So please chat away on the side, share with us what you're drinking and where you're drinking it from, and also hashtag 67 from home for social media. As usual, we'll have 15 minutes at the end where you can ask Gearoid some very, very difficult Burgundy questions, please. Okay, big hello to Gearoid.
Thanks very much.
Hey, how are you?
I'm okay. As you know, I'm a bit of a technophobe, so I'm a bit terrified by all these screens and share screens, but hopefully we'll get there.
Okay, well, thank you very much for this. The choice of wines is great. Choice of vineyards is great. So I'm really looking forward to hearing your rationale behind why you've picked those vineyards.
Cool. Great. So I suppose we should just...
Yeah. Do you want to start sharing your screen?
Yeah. Oh, here we go. First technical...
Is this thing always works well in rehearsal? There you go. Brilliant.
Gosh. First hurdle.
Okay. All right. Thanks, Gearoid.
Thanks, Ronan. So hello. Good afternoon, everyone. A bit strange to be presenting to sort of a computer without seeing anyone. But there we are. I'll try and keep it lively. So yeah, I think Ronan convinced me to do this after I'd had a couple of glasses too many a couple of Fridays ago. Having a discussion on Instagram Live with my colleague Jason Haynes about the top Premier Crus of the Côte de Nuits, he thought that would maybe make a good subject matter for a webinar at Pall Mall. So thank you to Ronan and the team at Pall Mall. As a fellow member at 67 Pall Mall, well, I do miss somewhere to go and relax and try all those amazing wines. So yeah, Burgundy. Well, I love Burgundy. I'm lucky enough now that most of my day job at Flint Wines is a lot to do with Burgundy, and my evening job at Cotes, a restaurant, Burgundy-centric restaurant in the city, is pretty much all Burgundy too. So that's, yeah, Burgundy's been a love of mine really now for about 20 years. And I think one of the reasons I love Burgundy is that it really is very complicated and complex. You'll never know it all. It's constantly changing and moving. Each vintage brings new stories. Vineyards change hands, people get married, people get divorced, and things change around who owns what. So it's a very complex place. But in essence, the bit we're focusing on this afternoon, the Côte de Nuits, is the central part of the northern part of the Côte d'Or. So the Côte d'Or, the Golden Slopes, is effectively an escarpment, sort of it's falling off the plateau of the River Saône. And it's just the main thing, everything we're talking about in terms of terroir will be these kind of limestone, clay sort of mixes. The northern limit of the Côte de Nuits is Dijon, and then we're going to be we're probably traveling along sort of RN74 from Dijon down to the southern part of Côte de Nuits, which is sort of Prémaux-Pressé, and we'll discuss all the sort of villages in between. So I suppose we should probably get down to, looking at the first wines. And as Ronan said, yeah, it's quite an interesting mix. So I've tried to mix it up in terms of vintages, tried to mix it up in terms of terroirs and villages. And then also winemakers. There's some domain wines. There's also a couple of wines more négociant. So just to have a good spread of different topics to discuss as we taste through the wines. Ronan said that I should aim for about 40-45 minutes of me talking you through the wines and talking about all the subjects related to that, and then hopefully we'll have a few questions at the end. Cool, so the first wine I chose was a Chambre-Musigny. In terms of the order, I've gone youngest to oldest. I thought about it for quite a while. At one point I was going to do it by village, north to south. At another point I was going to do it oldest to youngest, but I finally went for, let's do the youngest, and we'll start there, and we'll talk our way through and see how we get on. So I thought in that case we should probably start with the Chambre-Musigny. Chambol quite a small village. There's less than 20 producers. It's very, and they're all very close in terms of their own relationships. They all help each other. It's a very convivial village. And I think in terms of quality, Chambol, really, really high standard. It's probably less famous than either Gearoid Chambertin or Von Romanet, which are kind of the two sort of most celebrated villages of the Côte in terms of quality of the vineyards, especially their Grand Crus. But Chambon-Musigny, very important nonetheless. And the Instagram live that I referred to earlier, Amoureuse came out top in terms of being, in my top 10 Premier Cru vineyards. It's often referred to just as Amoureuse, which is unusual for a Premier Cru vineyard. It's usually with the Grand Crus to get that sort of treatment where they're called Richebourg or Chambertin. People refer to it as Amoureuse. It's almost a standalone. It doesn't need the prefix of the Chambol or the Chambon-Musigny. It's a standalone wine. It's a really small vineyard. It's about 5 hectares.
Garrett,
hi.
you may need to move your PowerPoint on.
Oh, sorry. Done on
Technology.
Technology.
There you go.
Thanks, Ronan. Yeah, Ronan, please help me at any point. I'm I need lots of help. Thanks, Ronan. So, we're looking at Chambon-Musigny, Premier Cru les Amoureuse. So Amoureuse, so it sits just below the Musigny, and I think I've got a map actually, I've tried to do a nice fancy sort of almost magnifying glass. So if you look on the main part of the map, you can see where Musigny sits on that side of the village. And here we're facing sort of south and east. And I've just highlighted the Les Amoureuses. And it's quite interesting. The Petit Vougeot looks like it's bordering the Amoureuse there, but actually there's quite a big drop down, and not due to anything geological. It was through quarrying. So it's a very different aspect. But Les Amoureuses, beautiful wines, very stony vineyard, and then obviously a very clay sort of marl topsoil. The word Amoureuse, I always, for the first sort of 10, 15 years of my my sommelier life, I always believed that Amoureuse had something to do with love or beauty or sort of something. Maybe it was a spot where people used to go to propose or whatever. But it turns out, having read Jasper Morris's book, and I'm sure all my fellow Burgundy lovers will have it, he thinks it probably more refers to the wine growers talking about when the clay topsoil gets wet, it gets quite thick and it sticks to your boots, a bit like young lovers clinging. It clings to your boots, which is a bit less romantic than the story that I used to think about Amoureuse. But some of the vineyard names in the Côte are quite funny. I think my favorite one recently that I found out about was the Les Merges des Dents de Chien. So it's the stones like dog's teeth. And it apparently was because the growers, when they were working in that vineyard in Saint-Aubin, they used to always get their hands cut on these very sharp stones. So yeah, there we go. But let's start tasting the wine and start thinking about it. So the Amoureuse made by a lot of the top growers, De Vogüé, Roumier, Groffier, but also Albert Bichot, one of the very important négociants. Négociants are very important. I mean, it's in the last number of years, a lot of people have been very critical of the négociants and saying, oh, they do this, they do that. But if you go back some years ago, because of the fractioned ownership of the vineyards, it was really hard to make a living for quite a lot of the small growers, and négociants really did help them to survive. And the Bichot family, I think, founded in 1831, so one of the most historic one. And under the stewardship of Albert Bichot, who's in charge of the wines now, the wines are very, very high quality. And here we're about to taste their Amoureuse. So straight away, I mean, that lovely perfume. I mean, Chambol to me, from sites like Musigny, from Amoureuse, from Les Feuilles, you always want these almost wild, wild strawberry, wild raspberry, berried fruit. But it's almost very delicate and very perfumed, floral. Not too much on new oak. I'm just going to pull up there we go. So it's had, probably about 14, 15 months in new oak, 50% of the new oak, and you don't really feel the oak at all in the nose, and it's still quite young. It's 2017. 2017, a good vintage. The Burgundians were very happy with 17. There was a bit more juice than there had been the previous years. We'll talk about later. So it was a bit more bountiful. It was kind of a warm, not too eventful season, and they were able to make some good wines, and also a bit more volume than they had in 16 and 15 and things like that. And as you'd expect in Amarose, it's just silky smooth. Those tannins are so well integrated. And it's not powerful in terms of how it hits your palate, but the flavors they're intense, they're delicate, but they're long. You know, it's persistent, and it fills your mouth with these, you know, these gorgeous layers of fruit and texture and a bit of earthiness and stoniness. And you can really feel, I mean, in Chambolle, as I mentioned earlier, that limestone concentration in Chambolle is very important, and you can really, really feel that. And yeah, it's that's delicious. And anything that stays in your palate that long, over a minute, you're in for a treat. I mean, is it too young to drink it now? Probably. I think that wine will get better for many, many years. But I think what we've seen in the last sort of 10 or 15 years with climate change is that the Burgundians haven't had the problem they would have had with ripeness, say, in the 1970s or 80s, or even into some of the vintages in the 90s. I mean, and climate change is having an impact. I think I was at a seminar with Alex Morrow from Chassagne recently, it was last year, and he was asked about climate change, and he said, well, I'm no scientist or anything else, but his birthday is in September. And he explained that as a boy, they used to celebrate his birthday and then do the harvest. But as an adult, he now pretty much always has the grapes in and then celebrates his birthday. So there's almost like a month, maybe even a bit more, advancement of harvests in the Burgundy region the last 10, 15 years. And so even though one or two of the world's great politicians are telling us that the climate change is nonsense, it definitely is having an impact. And yeah, people working in vineyards, farmers will see that more than anyone. But yeah, back to the wine. Yeah, it's probably, that can age for easily another 10 years. I find myself, I like the sweet spot for sort of Premier Cru levels. When they start to get sort of 5-7 years of age, you can see a lot of quality. And if you're lucky enough to own 6 bottles, you know, maybe try one after 5 years and then work out what works for you in terms of a drinking window. I think it's a beautiful wine. The tannins they're fantastic. They're so well integrated. And it's showing all that lovely Amarose, sort of, the French have that lovely word soyeux, you know, it's smooth, it's silky. Yeah, that's a good way to start a Sunday afternoon anyway, as a glass of wine. So I should have had last night, I had some last night, and I ended up picking a Moët Saint-Denis Premier Cru, but the Amarose would have done even better. So yeah, we're moving on now to the next wine then. Wine number 2 is a Gearoid Chambertin Premier Cru Au Combat, and that's from Domaine Arlo. I should mention there are no wines from Moët Saint-Denis in this lineup, but the next wine is from a winery that's based in Moët Saint-Denis. Moët Saint-Denis has some wonderful vineyards, obviously the Grand Crus, like Clos de Tarte and Clos Saint-Denis, Clos de la Roche, and Clos de l'Ombre. But some beautiful Premier Crus as well, La Riotte, Nyon, Ruchot, Montluisson, famous for some of the white wines, some of the very rare white wines that are produced in Côte d'Ivoire. But just on this particular lineup, we don't have a Premier Cru from Moët Saint-Denis, but I certainly do love them. And but I have, 3 of the winemakers are based in Moët. So we've got Romain Topinot, the Seyss family, and Cyprien Arlo, who's a winemaker in Moët Saint-Denis. So Premier Cru Au Combat. Combat is a vineyard that I love. In Gearoid, so Gearoid Chambertin, they were the real clever guys of marketing. They were the first village to attach their most famous vineyard, the Chambertin, to the village name of Gearoid back in 1847. The marketing men were already going strong back then. So as you can imagine, for those of you who maybe a bit more new in your wine journey, all of the villages in the Côte de Nuits, Côte de Beaune, they've all attached their most well, arguably best vineyard or considered the most sought after vineyard to their village names. So Gearoid Chambertin, they were the first to do that. And it's also one of the most historic area for vines. I mean, I think, there was writings about the wines of Gearoid in that area going back to the 6th century. And I think there were some geological digs in the area that I've discovered that even maybe went back even further, right into the Roman times, 1st, 2nd century AD. So there's been vine growing going on in the village of Gearoid for almost, for millennia. So Combot is in a really interesting situation. I think I've got a map somewhere. Sorry, Rowan's going to tell me off for not scrolling down.
I was just about to tell you off, yeah.
Yeah, so there we go. So Combot, you can see it just sits on the Maurice Saint-Denis border here, and it's surrounded on all sides by Grand Crus. It's got La Trichière, Mazière, or Charme, and it's got Claude Le Roche on the other side in the Maurice Saint-Denis side. So it really is a fantastic piece of terroir. Over the years, it has been, I know that back in 83, the Ligné family, would have been Georges Ligné. They put forward a dossier to the authorities to have it requested as a Grand Cru, either to be part of La Trichière or to be Combot Grand Cru. But as you can imagine, it's always very hard to get those things changed. My friends in Maurice Saint-Denis would tell me a story. Obviously, they don't think that themselves, but they would say that historically, because most of the growers who owned Combot were actually based in Maurice Saint-Denis, that when the Gearoid growers were deciding which plots were going to be Grand Crus or Premier Crus, of course, they were not going to argue too hard to have Combot as part of their Grand Crus. Now, I'm guessing, that's maybe part of those legendary stories. There's a few one might talk about over the course of the tasting, but I'm pretty sure if you look at it, if you're in the vineyard and you talk to one or two of the growers about some of the differences in Combot versus Claude Le Roche or La Trichière, it has actually got a little slight bit of a dip. So you are in that sweet spot where it's sort of 260 to 300 meters. All those vineyards, I don't know if you can see my arrow there. So starting with the Rouchots, and you go down through the Claude Bèze Chambertin, and the Mazières, all those Chambertin Grand Crus there. That's really in that sweet spot, 260 to 300 meters, all facing easterly, and with slight turn on the south. And Combot sits right in that, but it's slightly undulating, got a slight dip in the vineyard, which means it's just got slightly heavier soils, like retaining a bit more moisture. And it's also, if you look, you can just see the contour lines there. That's the Comte de Gisard that just sits above Gearoid. And they've got some cold winds and they really come straight into Combot. Combot's quite often one of the latest harvested vineyards in that area by the growers of Moray or Gearoid. So Combot is a very, very good piece of terroir, but potentially not just as, as good an aspect as La Trichière beside it, or Claude Le Roche, which makes superb Grand Crus in Maurice Saint-Denis. So let's try the wine. So Domaine Arlo, this is Cyprien Arlo. Cyprien must have taken over from his dad, gosh, maybe about 20 years ago. And a really great winemaker, working biodynamically. So using no chemicals or anything like that. Let me just put up the previous slide. So yeah, there's probably some things I've just mentioned there. Oh yeah, it mentions the Comte de Gisard things, yeah, and clay limestone soil. But Cyprien Arlo, great winemaker. I still think he's young because obviously I think he's around my age, early 40s, so that's definitely young. Yeah, as I was saying, farming biodynamically, using horses in the vineyard, which is very important in terms of ploughing, to looking after the soil. Biodynamics can sometimes be misconstrued, but certainly it shows that the winemakers really care about what they're doing in the vineyard, what they're doing in the soils. So yeah. So it's the same vintage, 2017, but you're really seeing a stylistic difference there. So Gearoid, as I would have expected, more robust, more strong, puissant, yeah, sort of more powerful. The mouthfeel is different as well. You get this. It really is. I mean, even though it's on that Moray border, I think it really speaks more of La Trichière Chambertin in terms of that power and weight and intensity. Darker fruits. I don't think we're seeing those strawberry characters. It's more darker forest berry fruits, wild berries. And the tannins are a little bit more chunky as well. And I would definitely, whereas the Amarose, you could maybe think about having it last now. I think with the Combat, you can see that you would really want to keep that and mature it, and at least another 5 years. And but I think it's showing really, really well. Everything you'd want from a Premier Cru Combat. I think one thing to note about being Grand Cru or Premier Cru, if you speak to people who have vineyards like Combat or Clos Saint-Jacques or Amarose, those kind of top Malconsor, those sort of top Premier Crus of the Côte de Nuits, they'd probably rather know that we've got the really best Premier Cru than maybe being a sort of an also-ran Grand Cru. Because if you think of some of the Grand Crus, even within Chambertin, some of the terroir just isn't as good as maybe Chambertin itself or Claude Bez, which really are the 2 stars. Even if you look at a vineyard like Claude Vugel, I mean, 50 hectares, massive vineyard, and qualitatively, I don't think everything is just as you know, as good as that. You know, it's a bit fermented like that. Even within Echezeaux, I don't think all Echezeaux necessarily is, certainly in, you know, if they're not in the right hands, won't be as good as a great Combat or a great Malconsor or a great Amarose. So I think secretly, if you spoke to Sylvain Marlowe or Jeremy Sayce about their holdings in Combat, they would be happy that they're making one of the, you know, real top Premier Crus of the Côte de Nuits. Yeah, cool. So I hope you're enjoying that as much as I am, because I think that's a cracking wine. And yeah, I think most of the producers are in Moët Saint-Denis still, with Samio, Arlo, Domaine des Beaumont, Dujax, the Niniers are all the Maury guys, Arlo obviously. And then in Gearoid, the Trappé family have some. There's Trappé, Rossignol Trappé, and Marchand. So there are a couple of Gearoid producers making Combat, so it is split up. That vineyard there, which is, it's only about 5 hectares again, just under 5 hectares, I think, so it's quite a small vineyard. So that's cool. So then we're moving into, we're going to move into to Vosne Romanée. So Vosne Romanée, probably arguably with Gearoid the top or the best known village in the Côte de Nuits, which is funny really when you think that Côte de Nuits is actually named after the town of Nuits Saint-Georges, the Nuitons, which is the largest establishment in the Côte de Nuits, of about 5,000 people, which is obviously small when I'm sat here in London, but it's quite big compared to somewhere like Chambol or Moët Saint-Denis, where there's, you know, a lot less people living there. But yeah, Nuits Saint-Georges, I think in terms of the world wine market, doesn't have the Grand Crus. So Vosne Romanée and Gearoid are sort of the ones that argue it out about who's the top village on Côte de Nuits. Malconsor, again, back to that tasting or the Instagram live that we did, Malconsor was in the top 3 of both myself and Jason Haynes. And I think, Malconsor in the right hands are wonderful wines. I always remember that quote, and I can't remember if it was either Hugh Johnson or Michael Broadbent or one of those commentators, and I always remembered it from my very early days of reading about Vosne Romanée. And I think when I first read it, I didn't understand it, but Vosne should always be the sort of like the iron fist and the velvet glove, and it was only with more tasting and more experience and learning more that I could understand that the wines of Vosne should always have this kind of power, but at the same time should be silky smooth, probably more akin to the Chambre Musigny than the Gervais Chambertins in a way. Yeah, they're always intense, always elegant. So Malconsor, in terms of it's actually, yes, hi Ron, what am I doing? Oh, yes, go on. Hi. How do I do that? There we go. Oh.
There you go.
Fire. Oh, there we are. Well, that map's so that map's more going north to south. So you can see the arrow up the top to Dijon. And there's the Vugel that I just spoke about. But Malconsor is down here. And if you look at it, it's just bordering on La Tâche. But I was just going to mention there that actually, historically, Malconsor is quite a newcomer in terms of being planted to vines. I mean, most of these other ones have been planted hundreds and hundreds of years before. It was originally scrubland and was only planted in, God, what was it? It was like 1610, which in the Burgundian scheme of things, as we've been already talking about Gervais Chambertin back in the 1st century and definitely from the 6th century, Malconsor is a relatively newcomer. But you can see there on that map, and I've sort of highlighted it again with that in the larger circle there. Yeah, it's bordering La Tâche, and in terms of the style of the wines, it's just this lovely, this lovely big block of Vin Premier Cru magic. The largest holders are actually the Bichot family with one of their domains. So the Bichot family, as well as having the Roussillon's wines, we've tried one earlier, they also own some domains. They own the very famous Chablis domain, Langue de Paquis, who produced a very famous Grand Cru, the La Mouton, which is kind of a ghost Grand Cru. It's made from vines from two Grand Cru vineyards. It's a parcel of vines that sits along the Creuse Val d'Isère border. And that's a Grand Cru La Mouton, which is a fantastic wine if you get the chance to try it. And yeah, so domain Clos Frantin is one of the domains Bichot owns. And again, when you've got the power of a negociant house behind you, and you have the freedom to make the best wines that you can, that's really something strong. And the Bichot family, I think, they own about 1.7 hectares of the Malcansor, which is a nice chunk. Demonty and Dujac, and we're going to try some Dujac later, back in 2005, I think it was, they purchased the holdings of Thomas Moya, who was a vigneron. Vines were for sale. So Demonty actually makes a Malcansor Cuvée Christienne, which is very hard to find. Really small, tiny little parcel within the Malcansor in honor of his mother. That's Etienne Demonty makes that wine. And then the other wines, Coulanola, Charles Van Cagnac, a great winemaker who I really love his style, always delicate perfumed wines, no matter what village he's working in. He makes a great Malcansor, as does Catior. Again, one hard to find one. If you don't get in early on Primeur, you're not going to get any in. And I think I've got everyone. I think La Marche also has a bit. So yeah, a lot of top growers making Malcansor. So great vineyard, great growers. So you should always be in for a treat. So if ever anyone offers you a glass of Malcansor, you find a bottle of Malcansor, and obviously it's going to be a treat, because these days One Romanée Premier Crus don't come cheap. But yeah, definitely worth jumping on. We're also going into 2016. 2016 was a tricky vintage. I'm sure, as fans of Burgundy, yeah, really bad frost, hail. The yields in 16 were tiny, fraction of what they could do. I mean, some vineyards down 70, 80%. So really tough for the winemakers. But what was made in the end, very high quality. So let's try this Malcansor. If only every Sunday afternoon could be Amoureuse, Combat, Malcansor with more to come. Yeah, what a treat. Ron's going to tell me to flick to the bottle with the stats. He was actually amazed that I was able to produce a PowerPoint. I have to confess that somebody at Flint did help me with that. But so yeah, Alain Savreau, the winemaker at Frantin. And they're just mentioning some of the things we're talking about, where the vineyard was. And again, oak barrels, 20 to 30%, or 20 to 30% new. Yeah, very perfumed again. Very mineral. All the power and profile and complexity of a Malcansor. That's a fantastic wine. And amazingly, a bit like the Chambon, you could say, God, I could maybe drink that now, if I had it in my cellar. But at the same time, I think if you aged even another 2 or 3 years, you would get a wonderful wine there. Yeah. It's unusual to be talking about wines that other people are tasting and not to see their reactions, but I'm hoping you're getting as much pleasure as I am. But yeah, I think that's a wonderful Malcansor. I think Alain and Albert Bichot and the team, they should be very proud of the work they're doing at Clos Frantin. The wines are wonderful, and that's just a really, really good wine. Again, as a sommelier, that persistence, that length of flavour. I'm again thinking of my duck last night. I was tempted when I went into my wine fridge and I spotted my lineup for today. We're in there keeping at a good temperature. I was thinking, God, I wouldn't mind trying these with my duck dish that I made last night. But yeah, duck or anything gamey, venison, that'd be good as well. Pheasant, anything in that game family with these wines we've been trying so far would be just amazing. Although it's a long time since I left working on the floor, anytime I'm trying wines, I'm thinking about food pairings, and Yeah, these would be great on any table. And cool. So where I'm going to serve out my next couple of wines. I haven't been told off by Ronan for about 5 minutes, so that's a new record for me. He's going to tell me I should have poured all the wines out beforehand.
You're going to have to move on the next slide.
I'm going to have to move on the next. I wasn't ready. I was still talking about Malkinsor.
Okay, fine. Okay.
So moving on to the next slide. But yeah, Malkinsor along with Beaumont we'll try later. And Les Souchaux. Les Souchaux was another vineyard that made it into that top 10 Instagram live that Ronan had listened to that and prompted him to ask me to talk today. Souchaux, a larger plot, but again, some great winemakers. And I remember trying not so long ago a 93 Confront Cotes Souchaux, which was just wonderful. But the Confront style definitely needs time. Those are wines that, they are not really stemming, and they do cold soaks, and they make powerful, chunky wines, and they definitely need time. Okay, where am I? How do I do this? There we go. Malkinsor. Okay, so the next we're moving. So we've jumped a couple of vintages. We skipped 15 because 15s are too easy to taste. They were 2015. If you hadn't heard, was one of those sort of vintages of the century. Sunshine, perfect growing conditions. Everyone made good wine. If you didn't make good wine, go do something else. That's also been said of Von Rummenigge. I think somebody said that if you can't make good Von Rummenigge, you need to go and plant artichokes or something. So it's but I think 2015 was a bit similar. If you didn't make good wine in 2015, you need to go and think about doing something else. So Castier, Premier Cru. Well, the Castier vineyards. Let's go on to the vineyards first before we. So it sits up. You can just see here the arrow. Castier beside it, Clos Saint-Jacques on the other side. Lavaux. That is the Comte de Lavaux. It's for me, I don't know, certainly Le Clos Saint-Jacques in the right hands can rival the Grand Crus of Géry-Chambertin, and Les Castiers following swiftly on the heels. Castier, it's about 8 hectares of vines there, and drops down from 360 meters down to 300 meters. Lots of small stones, clay. There's actually, as you go down through the vineyard, there's 3 or 4 different sort of terroirs almost within the vineyards, and all of the growers try and farm that way. It's best if you've got a plot that goes down that. So if you can imagine, if you have a plot that starts there and goes right down through the vineyard, then you get little bits of slightly different terroirs as the spikes and the limestone and the various under soils play their part. It's sort of facing, as you can see, almost directly due east, which means it also gets a lovely bit of afternoon sun. A lot of white marl, some rocky outcrops in the middle. And as you get to the bottom of the vineyard, as is quite often the case, it gets slightly more alluvial. It's potentially, I think Clos Saint-Jacques is the most famous, and probably in tastings and in pricing, Clos Saint-Jacques would always come out top from those wines in the column. But I think that Castier for me would certainly be a close second. There's wonderful wines there. Clos Saint-Jacques is called the Comte Saint-Jacques is named after a statue of Saint-Jacques. My memory's playing right. I think historically it was on the on one of those pilgrimage routes to Santiago de Compostela, whatever it's called. So that's it's been a historical place, and the Clos Saint-Jacques has that statue, and it's facing south and east as well. So again, sunshine all morning and late into the afternoon. So great for ripening.
Sorry.
Yes, Ronan.
Someone was asking in the question box, which of these wines are whole bunch and destemmed? Do you know, or partially, or?
I'm pretty sure everything we've tried so far would have been destemmed, but the wines of Domaine Dujac use some stems, usually about 30-40% I think of stems for Dujac and Beaumont. Everyone else I think is destemming.
Okay, fantastic, thank you.
Very much, yeah. So what was I talking about? Clos Saint-Jacques? Yeah, so Clos Saint-Jacques is probably the most famous vineyard of that area. Castier coming in second. I heard a fantastic story. I think it might have been actually reading again Jasper's great book, Inside Burgundy, which is like I just love it because it's, you can dip into it and there's so many great stories. But there was a story in there, the previous owner, so if you go back about 100 years, the Comte de Moucheron, I think he was called, and he was a bit of a character, and I think when they were doing the classifications, he didn't fill in the forms for any of his vineyard holdings. Actually, then there was like a meeting and to discuss which vineyards were going to be Grand Cru, Premier Cru, all this kind of things. And apparently, when they were discussing the Clos Saint-Jacques at that point, which was considered one of the best vineyards, he started smoking. And I know it's hard for me to believe, having lived in France 20 years ago, where everyone smoked everywhere. Apparently, he was thrown out of this meeting because they didn't want him smoking in there. And he was stood outside smoking when they decided that Clos Saint-Jacques should be a Premier Cru. Again, whether that's one of those stories that sort of got better as the years went on, I'm not sure, but it's still a good story to think that one of the owners of Clos Saint-Jacques back in the day didn't fill out the paperwork, and when they were having the final meeting about having it as a Grand Cru, decided he'd rather be outside smoking or having a glass of wine. But Clos Saint-Jacques, great vineyard. I think 5 growers, Rousseau the most famous, along with people like Fourier, Bruno Claire making great wines. I think Jadot's also got a bit, and Esmond. And then into the Casetier. So we're here tasting Henri Magnan's version. Henri Magnan, great winemaker.
Oh, Gearoid, yeah, sorry, going back to Clos Saint-Jacques, I think we've been before to Rousseau, and if you go to Rousseau, the first wine he'll give you is Chambertin, and then the second wine he gives you is a Premier Cru, Clos Saint-Jacques, and then he goes back again to his Clos de Bez. So he
does it. He would do his Rouchot, I think, before Clos Saint-Jacques. Yeah, in the last time I was there.
But as far as he's concerned, it's up there as a Premier, as a Grand Cru.
I mean, for me, it's Grand Cru level, and it's better than a lot of the more average Grand Crus that you and I have discussed many times before, and I alluded to earlier on in this chat. But Clos Saint-Jacques for me, especially in the right hands, Rousseau, Fourier, Bruno Claire, I mean, fantastic wines, arguably, as you say, Grand Cru level at least. But maybe they like having the best of the Premier Crus, and because they price them accordingly. It's not like they're priced as Grand Crus. They're not charging any less for them, that's for sure. So here's Henri Magnan. I'd say one of the rising stars. Charles, the winemaker there now, brilliant young winemaker, so dedicated, hardworking, and his Casetier definitely has that cross section of all the terroirs within the Casetier. So definitely a treat to try that. Oh, I've probably got a fiche technique that Ron's going to tell me to put up. There we go, Charles Magnan. I probably should have read this before I came on, right? So talking about, east facing, the sunshine, I think I've talked about that. Yeah, the soils, we spoke about the limestone, the marl. Yep. Lovely. Oh, that's good. Typical Gearoid, a bit more power, strength, a bit more dark berried fruit, that wild forest berries. Very intense, very long. Again, the flavors, the tannins, very well integrated. And 14 is an interesting one because it wasn't a very eventful season in a way. It wasn't particularly hot or cold or that. Again, as there was in that period, some hail and frost, as there had been pretty much every year in that sort of from 11, 12 through 13, 14. But it wasn't shouted out a lot about the red wines. The whites were stunning. The whites, arguably one of the best white wine vintages ever. But the reds sort of went under the radar. But I was doing a tasting recently with Roman Topino, who we'll see, and we were trying his Riot. He compared his 14. He thinks it tastes a bit like the 78s. Now, the 78s were stunning. When I was first working as a sommelier back in the 90s, I know it's hard to believe because I still only 27, but when I was working as a sommelier back in the 90s, there were still quite a few 78s that you could get access to, and they were just amazing. And I actually tasted some Rousseau 78s, and they were just amazing. So he thinks 14 to him feels like 78, and then just trying it there, it really is showing well. And I think as well will age a bit like the 78s really, really well. So I'm surprised Ronan didn't jump in there with my some funny comments. Obviously, Ronan's about 20 years older than me. You probably could see that straight away.
Don't start.
Yeah, no, that's great. And that's everything you'd expect from a wine, from that Combe as well, that Combe Saint-Jacques. A wonderful Gearoid terroir. It's stony, it's mineral. You can almost feel that it's got textural. It has got sort of stony grip on the palate too, and yeah, brilliant. And if you've got that in your cellar, there's no hurry. That's gonna last easily another 5-10 years. And again, it's that people ask me about drinking windows all the time. It's so personal. We're talking on Friday in that Instagram thing we do every week, and Gareth Birchley was talking about the age of the wines when you drink them, and I said to him that I find myself probably enjoying wines maybe when other people might consider them too young. It's just my palate. That's how I'm always scared almost to miss the wine, because there's nothing worse than opening a bottle and it's like it's too late. Maybe it's just gone over the hill a bit and it's tired. But this wine, I wouldn't be worried about that in terms of aging. And he's definitely one to watch. If you haven't come across his wines, Charles is definitely, he's a bundle of energy and dynamism. He's trying to make some really, really top wines. He wants to be on the top table, and I think with that wine you can see that he's maybe going to get there. Okay, so Gearoid. So we're going to go down to Nuits Saint-Georges. Nuits, we're going to taste the most famous vineyard, the Nuits Saint-Georges. Nuits, yeah, so it's sort of, Nuits is kind of interesting. It's kind of divided into 3 sections. So you've got the section that we could see here a little bit on the Vosne Romanée side. Vineyards there like Merget, Boudot, very, very good, Chéniaux, the Damaude. There's a lot of really top terroir there. So that's kind of the Vosne side, sort of north of the town or the village. Then you've got this central part, which is sort of the Nuitons, the people from Nuits. They have in their minds, their most celebrated vintage. As well as Les Saint-Georges, you've got Les Cailles, Les Vaucrans. And I don't know, if you think back to the conversation we had about Combat, Les Saint-Georges, I think there's been a dossier put in for that recently to be a Grand Cru. As you can imagine, with any sort of bureaucracy, that'll take a long time. And if they make Les Saint-Georges a Grand Cru, then I think producers who are making Vaucrans, Les Cailles, would also be thinking about making an argument, because Les Cailles and Vaucrans also can be very long-lived, make top wines. The reason, I don't mind saying, I almost put a Henri Gouge wine in, because I love Henri Gouge. But I just wanted a bit of hospice wine from Hospice de Nuits. So the Hospice of Nuits, not as famous as the Hospice de Beaune, which is much bigger, much more celebrated, much more famous, but it's actually, the Hospice de Nuits is more, it's more historic. I think it's 1270. So much more historic than the Hospice de Nuits, which is 1443, which is obviously a newcomer. But again, doing good works in the community. So those hospice wines, it's a charity auction, Hospice de Beaune, Hospice de Nuits, where the vine growers provide barrels through the auction house, and then all the proceeds go to local charities looking after schools or hospitals or other things. So a Hospice de Nuits wine, I thought it'd be interesting just to put that in there. And Roman Copenot, as we haven't got a Moray Saint-Denis wine, we've got a couple of Moray-based growers. So 2012, good vintage, nice warm summer. I think a top vintage for me, 2012. Again, got a little bit forgotten about after the likes of 15 and 16, but great wines in 2012. Les Saint-Georges itself, great piece of terroir, about 7 hectares, and some of the very best growers in Nuits are there: Gouge, Lisy-Belair, Chevillon, Michelot. So it's a real top area. The other bit that we can't really see here on this map, but you can see there, Premo Pressy. So if you go further south down towards Beaune, you've got some very famous vineyards as well. Claude Larlot, Claude Forêt, and then the Claude Le Maréchal, a monopole from the Meunier family. Freddie Meunier's wines, fantastic. It was on a very long lease for about 100 years to Faiblay, one of the big negociants. But I think Freddie Meunier took it back in 2003, and the wines have just been, they were already good, but they've gone on to another level with him. And Premo, so even though it's the village of Premo Pressy, they label under Nuits Saint-Georges. And lots of quarries and things here, a lot of rocks. You can really see the subsoils, all those Bathonian, Bajokian, Jurassic rocks are really visible when you go down sort of towards Premo and Corgola. Lots of quarries. In fact, I think it's on that map, I think it's under Perrières in Nuits. There's actually an active quarry underneath the vineyard still today. So it's, all those marbles and rocks they could pull out there are still very important. So let's try Roman's hospice effort. So the Hospice de Nuits takes place on Palm Sunday, so the Sunday before Easter every year, and goes to charity. So by buying this bottle, we're helping those less fortunate in Bergen.
Should we see the wine bottle?
Pardon?
Should we move the PowerPoint? Let's see the wine bottle.
Oh, sorry, yeah. Oh, wrong way. There you go. I mentioned of Ulite limestone. Yeah, Ulite Blanche is there's a big thick tranche or slice of Ulite Blanche underneath Nuits. If you ever talk to some of their wine growers, they'll talk about that subsoil being very important as part of their terroir. I was just going to remark there, this is the first wine, I think, getting into that sort of secondary part of its life. You're starting to see some more of those earthy notes, a bit more sort of warm, sort of spicy fruit. The fruit itself starting to go into cooked fruit, but yeah, more evolved. Yeah, it's more a bit leather, sort of spice. Yeah, lovely. But again, still very much in the game. It's now, yeah, eight years old. One or two sommelier friends of mine who tease me about my love of Pinot say that, you know, it can't age, but it becomes thin and weedy after 2 minutes. Yeah, I think they're lovely earthiness, spiciness, warmth, generosity. And you can feel that sunshine vintage. It was really hot summer 12, and that's coming out there. You can really feel that in the flavor profile of the wine. Yeah, good to see those aged Burgundies holding up well. So we're moving into the next wine. So we're back to Vosne Romanée. We've got 2 wines from Vosne, like Gearoid. I suppose that's normal when you think about the sort of the top vineyards in the Premier Cru level in the Côte d'Ivoire. And then Domaine Dujac. And I really wanted to include a wine from Domaine Dujac. Lots of reasons, some personal and some professional. On a personal level, Jeremy Sace, who's now back at his family domain. I first met Jeremy when he was in London working in the wine trade, just getting some experience and learning about the market. And yeah, we're the same age, and Jeremy introduced me to a lot of knowledge and yeah, tastings and stuff about Burgundy. And Domaine Dujac, I was lucky enough when I was still working back then, yeah, Dujac's wines weren't at the same price point that they are now, and I was able to taste Clos Saint-Denis, Côte de la Roche, all their top grown crus on a regular basis in the restaurant. And by the time I got to being head sommelier at Tom Aiken's at Punt restaurant back at Elliston Street back in 2003, yeah, we had a lot of the wines of Rousseau Dujac all through my old colleague, or my colleague Jason Haynes, but then he was at OWL. But Dujac's always been close to my heart. So the Beaumont.
Garrett, can I just say, apart from moving the PowerPoint on, obviously, but Topinot Merme is Roman Topinot as well, isn't it?
Roman Topinot, yeah.
Yeah, okay. So he's involved in 2 estates, his own, and then he's involved with Topinot Merme.
So Roman Topinot, he's got his own wines, which is sort of a négoce wine or something like this, where it's a hospice wine. Then there's Domaine Topinot Merme, which is, as you can imagine, there was a Topinot family and a Merme family, there was a marriage. But the Topinot Mermes, they go back centuries in the area. And Roman's got a real wide range of vineyards. He's got vines in the Côte de Beaune as well, mostly around Moray. He came back to the family domain back in 1998, converted into organics by O2, and another winemaker making great wines. And some of his terroirs, sort of slightly less fashionable things like the Bel Air Premier Cru at the top of the Grand Crus, which in warm years I think make stunning wines. La Riotte, I did a flight of La Riotte about a month ago. They were just amazing, back to 07. So Roman Topinot should be definitely on people's radars if they're trying to get into Burgundy and discover different terroirs. And his Mazaire, Mazaire is an interesting Grand Cru because it can be labelled Mazaire or Charme. And a lot of people just put it as Charme because it's maybe in a way easier for the market and those kind of things. But he makes a true Mazaire, and it's a wonderful wine. And a little bit of trivia, he's the man stopping Côte de l'Ombre from having its monopole. He has about a barrel's worth, sort of an ouvrier's worth of Côte de l'Ombre, which is very rare, obviously, because he doesn't make that much. And but I think most people just think Côte de l'Ombre is a monopole, but it's not. There's a little patch of Roman Topinot's vines in there that doesn't allow it to be a monopole. So yeah, I'm now getting lost. What was I talking? I was talking about Vosne Romanée. Yes, I was back in Beaumont. So the Beaumont, as you can see, is more on the border of Vougeot. So Vougeot, so Flagy Echezot, which we can see here. So Flagy itself, the village is on the other side of the RN74. So from vineyard point of view, the vineyards kind of fall underneath the territory of Vendôme. You can see the Beaumont there. And Jeremy Sace was telling me that, yeah, Beaumont, yeah, great vineyard, high elevation. I just want to go back, because he told me, where was that? So I just want to check the years. So he said that they had, some were planted back in 87, one parcel, but the average age of the parcel as a whole is 80 years of age. So 80 years of age, really old vines, so giving a lot of complexity. I was interested to try this as well. 2011, as some of you will know, was kind of much maligned by the press. They didn't kind of like it, but I think in the right hands, that sort of slightly cooler, wetter year, which is a little bit more difficult, you sometimes get stunning wines. So let's see how this, I haven't tried this wine probably for, I don't know, many years. So let's have a look at 2011. Boom. So straight away, you can detect that it's definitely, compared to the last wine, which was from a hotter year, this is from a cooler year. You can already see that. And also using stems, I think, brings that sort of freshness. There's already on the nose, sort of a crunchier sort of aroma. And it's definitely moving on, getting more into those kind of older tertiary sort of, the French have that lovely word sous-bois, which is kind of, I guess, earth, kind of forest floor. That's really starting to get that. Thankfully, I remember when I was learning about Burgundy, some of the older critics or commentators used to talk about sort of pig shit and manure and these kind of things. And thankfully, I've never really got those aromas, but I do, when they get to a certain age, get things like sous-bois, yeah, that sort of undergrowth, underbrush. I suppose that's going to be the way to do it. I was expecting a Beaumont, very classy, very fine tannins. The most mature of the wines we tried, obviously, 2011. A tricky vintage, one that was really hard. Also, a vintage of Coccinelle that people refer to, the Ladybird vintages. 04 was another one, where, if you can imagine, you get sort of almost like a plague of ladybugs in the vineyards. And if some of them get into the vats, obviously when they're crushed, they give off a sort of a particular sort of aroma, chemical, like smell that can get into the wines. It's very pronounced in 04. You got a little bit of it in 11. I think the 11s in Cote Nuits, with the right producers, they're wonderful wines. I mean, that's excellent, and real true Vone in terms of its structure and power and the length of flavour. Yeah, so I think that's the most I've talked at a computer screen ever in my life, even in this new Zoom age. I'm sure you're probably all, maybe half of you are asleep, or the other half fed up listening to me. And I'm expecting some good questions, especially from Nigel Wilkinson, good friend of Ronan and I. He's been stalking Ronan throughout his webinar career, so we'll see what he's come up with. But Ronan, I think I'm done talking at the screen, probably.
Okay, great. Well, do you want to have a look at the Q&A? Do you want to click on the Q&A?
Oh, fire.
We'll see a few.
How do I do that, Ronan?
Down at the bottom, there's like two speech bubbles. That's the Q&A box.
Do I stop the share? Is that what I need to do?
Yep.
Oh, here we go.
So Johnny Popper is saying it's the first time he's had Dujac. Johnny Popper, where have you been? But he likes it very much. Yeah, a lot of very positive comments. People saying that it's a very informative session. Very good.
Did you see Lindsay from Lincoln? He wants to know when I'm going to come and finish tarmacking his drive. Well, Lindsay, I don't do so much tarmacking these days, but I'll see if maybe one of my clan can go up there and sort it out for me. Patrick from Portadown, what's he up to? Please could you confirm if mature Vone is excellent excellent vintage to accompany a traditional roast hedgehog. There we go, fantastic. From Doncaster, do I read all these out, Ronan, or?
No.
No. For your information, looking up Honorary Mania on Honest Grapes, Charles uses some whole bunches. There we go. There we go. Cool. Thank you from Miriam. And then, did you say that there was a connection with the Nuits Saint George? Okay, Liam from Limerick. So Domaine de Clofrantin. So Domaine de Clofrantin is the name of the domain, and they own a sizable, more than a hectare, 1.7 hectares of the Malkinsoul. Which region do you think offers the best value for Premier Cru Burgundy? I suppose in terms of Premier Cru in the Cote Nuits, if you really want value, you probably have to look around Fisa. They've got some nice Premier Crus up there. Yeah, producers, up and coming producers. Well, I've mentioned people like Charles Magnan, Domaine Magnan on the way up. Amélie Berthaud, who's based in Fixin, she's definitely one to watch, a younger grower. Yeah, there's some younger growers now. Pierre Durocher, I still think he's very young, because I think he only just turned 30 recently. He's making great wines in Gearoid Chambertin. Yeah, and I just can't see. I have several bottles from your crew, 15, 20 years. Do I need to rush to drink them? Sandra, yeah, again, that's very much personal choice, depending on the grower and depending on the vineyards. I mean, at Cabot, sometimes we have people doing BYOs and bringing sort of top Amaras and close end jacks from 85, 89, 90, and they're still wonderful. So very much down to your own palate. If you want them on those more tertiary, sort of earthy, sous-bois, wet earth kind of aromas, then yeah, 15, 20 years is great. As I said earlier, I probably drink them a bit too young, maybe, because I like them when they start to get 5 to 10, but it's personal choice.
Yeah, thank you very much, Garrett. Just another question for you. Just where would you say, in your opinion, outside of Burgundy, is making the most exciting Pinot Noir at the moment?
Well, I think there's some amazing things happening on the west coast of America, all the way really, from Santa Barbara up to Sonoma, up to Oregon. I think there's some amazing things going on there. Also in New Zealand, the South Island, Otago, some great wines. I've always liked some of the wines in and around sort of Melbourne, in Victoria. Some things going on around there. So yeah, but I think the west coast of California, there's a lot of things to look into over there. I mean, Oregon, there's some great Pinots. You and I tried some wonderful things there last year when we visited. And Sonoma Coast Pinots can be great. Santa Barbara, Gavin Shannon, one to watch. The pupil of Jim Clendenin, making some great vineyard, single vineyard wines down there. So yeah.
Yeah, great. Okay, Garrett, so that brings us to an hour. So thank you very much. One last question. Paul is asking, I have the 2017 Gearoid Au Combat from Dujac. How will this differ from Arlaud's example?
Slightly different style, yeah, a bit more stems, maybe not as deep in color. I think the Dujac styles always have that nice pale color, but again, will age wonderfully well. I think if you've got some combat, as you can see with the Arlo, no need to rush, I think. But lucky you is also to add, but yeah.
Yeah, well, I do remember, working as sommelier on the floor, and yeah, Gearoid Combat was always that wine that, was, most people didn't know, but it's tucked in there, surrounded by Grand Crus.
Yeah.
And it's a great wine.
Yeah. And I think with climate change, those warmer vintages running, you're going to see the Combat, I think, year in, year out, will be more consistent and make better, make that sort of Grand Cru level wines.
Yeah. Okay, Garrett, well, thank you so much for giving us an hour of your time. Any more duck, or it's finished? Because it would be a good time for duck, but
I have got a duck leg left from last night, so I might be able to, as long as Zoe lets me have it to myself, I might be able to have that with a couple of glasses of Pinot that are left over. But Ronan, thank you for inviting me, and thank you to everyone who's listened in and are watching, and sharing the love of Burgundy. It's and as I said, it's an ever-moving target, so it's really fascinating. So yeah.
Well, it's a pretty exciting time for Flint as well. You've just taken over Domain Direct.
Yeah, we have. So I've got more Burgundians to study and learn, and more vineyards to know. So it's
so you're sitting on a nice pile of Cosmoberry, no doubt.
A little bit, hopefully. Yeah.
Brilliant. Okay, thank you very much, Gearoid.
Cheers. Bye-bye. Thank you.